my YouTube gang, what's up? It's Joniversity again. And today, La Springa El Arabiya. Well, at least the prologue. But first, the disclaimer. Waiting. So, unless you've spent the last 2 years in the Delta Quadrant, you already know more or less what happened in the Arab Spring, so I won't waste time on that. Speaking of time, almost everybody seemed to be somewhat interested in comparing the Arab Spring to historical popular revolts. The most appropriate in terms of scope, size, and aspirations is the European Spring of Nations from 1848. The characteristics, as you'll see, are pretty familiar.
In 1848, there is this great upsurge of optimism about what people can accomplish together. There are revolutions in Paris, in Vienna, in Milan, in Berlin, in Prague, in Rome, you name it. And everyone thinks, now we will be able to establish constitutional forms of government everywhere, and perhaps even achieve national unification.
And that obviously ended extremely well.
It's in a moment of great optimism and hope for the future. And all that is dashed to pieces. You get the restoration of the monarchs in Austria and Prussia. You get the defeat of the Italians who want national unification. And France ends up with another Napoleon.
Now, if you really want to scare yourself, consider that in a broad historical perspective, it took Europe almost 150 years, 2 world wars, 1 Cold War, dozens of conflicts, and tens of millions of lives to actually stabilize and democratize to the Europe we know today. And they, mind you, didn't have Islamists. Actually, this is the center fallacy of the instant democracy ideology of the neocons, and also why the current system in Egypt of a strong military balancing the shakiness of newborn democracies is the right way to go. Not to mention preventing elected officials to go to war out of desperation to gain public support.
برنامج ان احنا نعمل نفتعل مشكلة مع اسرائيل وهيئ الجهاد ولا صوت يعلو فوق صوت المعركة ونسوق الشعب بالجزمة زي ما حصل قبل كده لسنوات طويلة.
But first to the question everybody seems to ask. Who won, Allah or the infidels? Okay, so Yemen is grayed out because they only had 1 candidate, which I think doesn't really count. And in 3 out of the 4 post-revolution newborn democracies, you can see the Islamists kind of won. While the 4th, Libya, indeed didn't turn to the Islamists, but still the liberals they have elected still support Sharia.
I cannot see a Libyan would disagree on Sharia will be the major source of legislation.
And that, don't fool yourself, is true for almost the entire Arab Muslim Middle East. So even if the democratic system survives long enough to mature and stabilize, don't count on seeing anything remotely close to liberal democracies that we know from the West. Well, at least not in the near future. And you should also know that Islamist leaders are here to stay for quite a while. And all you need to do is take a look at Muslim-dominant, democratic, and semi-democratic states to get that. But you should be careful, because when you take a look at the actual numbers, for instance in Egypt, you see that the story is of course not this "they are all Muslim fanatics" thing. Again, an important reminder that we should never treat large groups of people as a monolith. Take this little thing for instance. We have this guy elected in Egypt on the one hand, and we have this lady saying this on national TV on the other hand.
بعض المصريين خائفون منك لأنهم يخافون من انتماءاتك السياسية والدينية.
So the simplistic,
now I'm going to tell you the truth about the so-called Arab Spring. It's a lot more like an extremely bleak Mid-East winter.
Is the first myth that needs to be dispelled or at least mitigated. The second myth, which is actually less accurate and way more stupid, is the wishful thinking mainly in the European left, which thinks that the Arab Spring is
a popular anti-imperialist revolutionary development whether it's in Egypt or Tunisia or wherever.
So, to all of you who actually think this is a backlash against the colonial imperialist West, or oppression, or tyrants, or whatever, you are fucking wrong. Because there's only one cry that can rally the masses. Show me the money! This is what ultimately sparked the 1789 French Revolution, the 1848 Spring of Nations in Europe, the 1905 Russian Revolution, the 1911 Chinese Revolution, and almost any other revolution you can imagine. And what better proof is there than this? Yep. It turns out that in the Middle East, the most important thing in a democracy is prosperity. Even more important than free elections and free speech, which one would say is what democracy is all about. Which means that if there's one thing that really clouds the Arab Spring, it's this.
It's clear that the economic conditions of the Arab countries have not improved and by and large have worsened. The new or the transitional governments appear to have no better idea of what to do than the governments that they displaced. And in many ways, they're just simply repeating what the governments did.
Which, on the bright side, means that if we're actually going to see future elections in those new democracies, the Islamists won't probably do as well as they did, as we see in Tunisia,
birthplace of the Arab Spring, well over a year after its revolution. The Islamist-led government which won last year's elections is also fighting a major economic battle. Jobless young people are rioting and attacking government buildings like this police station. They want work and ex-regime figures out of local authorities.
Or for that matter, Hamas in Gaza.
Unemployed workers take to the streets, blaming Hamas for the lack of food and jobs.
Well, luckily for Hamas, they still have Western idiots like these.
We support Hamas!
Speaking of support, who should you support then? Well, regardless of our leadership, which has different things in mind, we as individuals, especially if like me, you're a liberal nationalist, should support anyone but tyrants, no matter how inconvenient. And of course, the right wing, which practically invented modern democracy, stands firmly against the tyrants.
The dictator and his entourage who were kicked out in Egypt were pro-West, a bit restrained on Israel, open to free enterprise, and resistant to Iranian-sponsored terror. We're going to regret helping the Egyptians kick out Mubarak.
Oh, well, at least we have the enlightened liberal left to stand against the tyrants.
When I hear on the news Gaddafi is prevailing, my heart sinks. And then the next day, if I hear on the news that the UN forces are prevailing, or the NATO American forces are prevailing, my heart sinks. It's not any longer a conflict in which one can take sides.
Well, so much for freedom-loving left-wingers. Speaking of lefties,
the US and its allies will do anything they can to prevent authentic democracy in the Arab world.
Oh, really, Charms Cuckoo? Please, tell us why.
An overwhelming majority of the population regards the United States as the main threat to their interests. From these observations, you can conclude pretty quickly, pretty easily, what policies are going to be.
But you see, this is exactly the point, you fucking moron. This attitude, which is less fierce the more liberal, democratic, and less Islamic the society gets, is in part the product of the toppled tyrants themselves. And Charms Cuckoo, which has this thing of supporting tyrants, should know that tyrants need 3 things to stay in power. 1 is third-party players, which you can blame all the ills of the world on. 2, use state-sponsored clerics to use religion as opium for the masses, or in Islam's case as crystal meth, which of course only increases its influence, and of course cracking down on any opposition, the main one being radical Islamists, which of course only increases their popularity. Now, don't kid yourself. At the end of the day, the most important thing for the West and America is keeping the oil flowing. And bearing in mind that since World War II, no war has ever erupted between two democratic states, we see that almost by default, democracies are more stable, both internally and externally. And stability is what keeps the oil flowing.
So in the case of an oil-rich country with a reliable, obedient dictator, they're given free rein. There was a planned protest in Saudi Arabia. The police presence was so overwhelming and intimidating that literally nobody even was willing to show up in the streets of Riyadh. The same in Kuwait. There was a small demonstration, very quickly crushed, no comment.
Oh, you dumb, ignorant fuck! Extreme and way more brutal force was used in Libya and is still used in Syria. And still the masses there continue rallying and fighting the regime. So of course, if you're an anti-American dimwit, the only question you will ask is, why America acts so differently? While the really important question is why the masses in Libya and Syria reacted so differently. Well, if you've learned anything from my video up till now, then you already know it's all about the money. Or as a real professor, which uses actual real numbers in real context, unlike Mr. Chom's cuckoo and his fucking hateful rhetoric, said,
Saudi Arabia has spent something like $130 billion in 2 emergency handouts. Remember, this is a figure larger than the entire annual government budget to 2007. And they've hired an additional 60,000 personnel just for the Ministry of the Interior alone. In Oman, Sultan Qaboos has created 35,000 new public sector jobs along with substantial rises in pay. In Qatar, where there's no chance of revolt, the government has increased its salary and pensions for public sector workers of around 60% and given the military 120% pay rise.
So this basically was the prologue, and in next week we will break it down state by state. So, like always, my beloved YouTube gang, peace, love, harmony. Have a good one, people. I love you all. It's all about the money.